The supermarket was loud, bright, and ordinary, yet in the middle of those aisles filled with cereal boxes and fluorescent lights, something extraordinary was about to happen. Emily Parker stood frozen near the bakery section, clutching nothing but the empty wrapper of a baguette she had already eaten. Her hands trembled as if she were holding a confession rather than crumpled paper. Her 3-year-old daughter, Lily, slept against her shoulder, unaware of the storm inside her mother's chest. Emily had not intended to eat the bread without paying, but hunger had a way of eroding pride, especially when it came to feeding a child. She hadn't eaten since the day before, and the moment she tore off that first piece, she couldn't stop. Now she was standing at the counter, face flushed, preparing for humiliation just to return what she had already consumed. She whispered in a cracking voice that she needed to return the bread even though it was gone. And that was when a man pushing a cart stopped, turned, and said something she never expected: "It's yours." Backhand index pointing right. If you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us bring more heart-touching stories to the world. Emily didn't even look up at first. She thought maybe she imagined it. After weeks of exhaustion, maybe her mind made up kindness because she needed it so desperately. But then she lifted her eyes and actually saw him, a young man, maybe in his early 30s, with gentle eyes and a tired but sincere smile. His cart carried diapers, snacks, juice boxes, and a small stuffed dinosaur with a missing tag, suggesting he had grabbed it impulsively for someone he loved. On his shirt were simple white letters that read, "It's yours." At first check, it looked like a printed message, just part of the shirt design, but the timing of those words made them feel directed straight at her breaking heart. Emily shook her head quickly, stammering that she couldn't accept kindness, that it wasn't right, that she didn't want anyone to pay for her mistakes. Her voice was shaky but filled with desperate dignity. But the man, whose name she would later learn was Daniel Reed, simply stepped closer and gently insisted that no one needed to return anything. Hunger wasn't a crime. Feeding a child wasn't something to be ashamed of. He said this softly, not to embarrass her but to shield her from the stares of curious shoppers passing by. He looked at the empty wrapper in her hand like it was something perfectly ordinary, not evidence of struggle, and instead of judgment, his eyes reflected understanding. She felt her throat close, not because of shame now, but because of how foreign kindness felt after everything she had been through. Emily had moved to a new town only a month earlier after escaping a long, suffocating relationship that left her with nothing but a suitcase of clothes and a toddler. She had taken refuge in a tiny one-bedroom apartment with thin walls and a flickering hallway light, trying to restart life from zero. But starting over was expensive. Hard. Unforgiving. Jobs didn't come easy, especially when she needed to bring Lily everywhere she went because she couldn't yet afford childcare. Food stamps were processing. Bills were stacking. Nights were long. And days like this, days when hunger forced her to choose between pride and survival, were becoming unbearably common. She told Daniel none of this, yet somehow, he seemed to understand anyway. Daniel, on the other hand, wasn't a stranger to hardship. He was a single dad raising his 5-year-old son, Mason, after losing his wife 2 years earlier to a sudden illness. The ring he still wore on his finger wasn't a symbol of holding on to the past, it was a reminder of a promise he intended to honor through the way he lived. He had learned that people could be fighting invisible battles while grocery shopping, that someone carrying a child in their arms might also be carrying burdens too heavy to speak aloud. When he saw Emily standing there with a trembling hand and a sleep-exhausted toddler, he didn't see a mistake, he saw a moment he could give grace, the same grace he wished the world had given him during his darkest days. Emily finally managed to whisper that she didn't want charity. But Daniel shook his head softly and told her that it wasn't charity, it was community, humanity, one person recognizing another person's struggle and choosing compassion over judgment. His tone wasn't pitying. It was level. Genuine. Almost calming. Emily felt her eyes burn. She tried to blink away the tears, but she failed. She had been holding her breath for months, thinking, surviving, fighting, and a simple act of kindness was all it took for her walls to collapse. Daniel noticed Lily's tiny fist gripping Emily's sweater, the quiet rise and fall of her breathing, her cheeks flushed with the innocent exhaustion of a little girl who didn't yet understand what it meant for her mother to hold the world together. He remembered Mason at that age, small, trusting, unaware of how desperately he clung to Daniel during the days when grief nearly swallowed him whole. He saw echoes of those days now in Emily, and the recognition softened something in him. He picked up another baguette from the display and placed it gently into her cart. Emily shook her head again, overwhelmed, but he reassured her. Everything inside him told him this moment mattered, that maybe, just maybe, someone needed to show Emily that she wasn't invisible in her struggle. He pushed his cart beside hers as they moved through the aisles, talking like two strangers who somehow felt like old friends. He didn't pry about her past or demand explanations. He simply asked if she needed help grabbing anything high on the shelves, joked softly to make her smile, and kept an eye on Lily, who eventually stirred and blinked up at him with curious, sleepy eyes. Emily found herself telling him small pieces of her story, not the darkest parts, but enough to explain the exhaustion under her eyes. She talked about leaving her old life, about starting over, about trying to find work. Daniel listened, not with the empty nods of someone waiting to speak, but with the authenticity of a person who had lived through pain and knew how to recognize it in others. He shared bits of his own life too, about raising Mason alone, about juggling work and parenting, about missing his wife but learning how to live without breaking every day. Their stories were different, yet somehow they connected in the spaces between sentences. As they checked out, Daniel paid for his groceries and discreetly handed the cashier money to cover Emily's items too. When she protested, he didn't argue, he just said he wanted to invest in someone he believed in. The words stunned her. No one had believed in her for a long time. Maybe ever. Outside the store, cold wind brushed across the parking lot, making Lily bury her face deeper into her mother's shoulder. Emily stood awkwardly beside her car, unsure how to thank Daniel in a way that matched the weight of his kindness. She whispered thank you repeatedly, each time feeling it wasn't enough. Daniel told her that she didn't owe him anything, not even gratitude, but that if she ever found herself able to, she should pass kindness forward. That's how change really happens, he said. Weeks passed. Emily found a part-time job at a small cafe. Daniel and Mason visited the cafe on weekends, always sitting by the corner table. Slowly, naturally, what started as a moment of compassion in a supermarket aisle turned into a friendship that both of them quietly relied on. Mason adored Lily. Lily adored Daniel. And Emily, she found herself smiling again, genuinely, deeply, something she thought her heart had forgotten how to do. Still, she carried fears. Wounds. Hesitations. She wondered if a single dad and a healing mother could form something stronger together, or if life would pull them apart with its usual cruelty. But Daniel never rushed her. He never pushed. He simply showed up, consistently, gently, proving through actions that he was not another storm in her life, but perhaps a safe place she could rest. One quiet afternoon, months after that first meeting, Emily baked bread at the cafe for the first time alone, kneading dough with a confidence she hadn't felt in herself in years. She wrapped a warm loaf in paper and drove to Daniel's house. When he opened the door, surprised but smiling, Emily handed him the bread and whispered that it was his, just as he had once told her. Not as repayment. Not as obligation. But as gratitude, and something more. Something hopeful. Daniel's eyes softened, and though neither of them said the words, both understood the symbolism. That night, as they sat on the porch watching the children chase fireflies, Emily realized that sometimes life doesn't give second chances, it gives people. People who turn second chances into beginnings. People who see past shame into possibility. People who show up in grocery stores wearing shirts that accidentally say exactly what your heart needs to hear, it's yours. Backhand index pointing right. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us create more meaningful, emotional stories for you. Speech balloon before you go, comment below. What would you have done if you were in Daniel's place or Emily's? And with that thought, the story ends not with a goodbye, but with the quiet promise that kindness can change everything, even in the most ordinary aisles of life.